It's 8 o'clock. Time to go live and read another chapter of Scarecrow of Oz, the 9th book in the Oz series. Last night we met we ran into Button Bright, and Button Bright already knew Trot and Captain Bill, and it made me wonder a little bit about Trot and Captain Bill because I'm like, how do they know Button Bright? I don't understand. Button Bright has been in these stories, but Trot and Captain Bill never have. So I did a little research on the internet today. If you'll recall, after the Emerald City of Oz, L. Frank Baum said he was done writing Oz books. Oz was cut off on the other side of the world, and he could never hear from them again, and he was going to have to stop writing Oz books. He really thought he was done writing Oz books. He wanted to be done writing Oz books, so he started a new series that started with a book called Sea Fairies, in which we are introduced to Captain Bill and Trot, and they go and meet like mermaids and make wishes and go under the sea, and it's a whole adventure thing with Trot and Captain Bill. That book did not sell well. Baum was very disappointed with the numbers, so he's like, how do I up the sales? Because he wanted to continue writing the adventures of Captain Bill and Trot. He's like, how do I get the numbers up for the next book? I know. I'll bring in Button Bright and Polychrome. So in the next book in that series, Sky Islands, Captain Bill and Trot go up into the sky, where they meet Button Bright and they meet the Rainbow's daughter Polychrome, and they have some adventures in the sky on the Sky Islands, which actually got referenced in the last chapter we read. That book also did not sell well. It actually sold less than Sea Fairies did. So eventually L. Frank Baum caved into all of the fan letters that were being written to him, and he's like, fine, I'll just write some more Oz books. And that's why we got the Patchwork Girl of Oz, then TikTok of Oz, and then the Scarecrow of Oz, which so far features 0 Scarecrow. So that gives you a little background, and 2 more books if you want to read them. I am probably not going to. Baum actually says that Sky Islands is the best thing he ever wrote. Upon his death, he said that his favorite thing out of all the books he'd ever written, was his favorite one was Sky Islands. Which is interesting to me because it's one of the 2 I'm not going to read. Anyway, Chapter 9 is titled The Kingdom of Jinxland. Let's see what happens. I'm just so glad I don't have to shake my head tonight. It was starting to hurt real bad. But no more Bumpy Man. Trot rode with more comfort than she had expected, although the swing swayed so much that she had to hold on tight with both hands. Captain Bill's bird followed the Orc, and Trot came next, with Button Bright trailing behind her. It was quite an imposing procession, but unfortunately there was no one to see it, for the Orc had headed straight for the great sandy desert, and in a few minutes after starting they were flying high over the broad waste where no living thing could exist. Sounds like the Deadly Desert. Maybe they're heading to Oz. Maybe we'll meet Scarecrow yet. The little girl thought this would be a bad place for the birds to lose strength or for the cloth ropes to give way, but although she could not help feeling a trifle nervous and fidgety, she had confidence in the huge and brilliantly plumaged bird that bore her, as well as in Captain Bill's knowledge of how to twist and fasten a rope that would hold. That was a remarkably big desert. There was nothing to relieve the monotony of view, and every minute seemed an hour, and every hour a day. Disagreeable fumes and gases rose from the sands, which would have been deadly to the travelers had they not been so high in the air. As it was, Trot was beginning to feel sick when a breath of fresher air filled her nostrils, and on looking ahead she saw a great cloud of pink-tinted mist. Even while she wondered what it could be, the Orc plunged boldly into the mist, and the other birds followed. She could see nothing for a time, nor could the bird which carried her see where the Orc had gone, but it kept flying as sturdily as ever. In a few minutes the mist had passed, and the girl saw the most beautiful landscape spread out below her, extending as far as her eye could reach. She saw bits of forest, verdure-clothed hills, fields of waving grain, fountains, rivers, and lakes, and throughout the scene were scattered groups of pretty houses and a few grand castles and palaces. Over all this delightful landscape, which from Trot's high perch seemed like a magnificent painted picture, was a rosy glow such as we sometimes see in the west at sunset. In this case, however, it was not in the west only, but everywhere. No wonder the Orc paused to circle slowly over this lovely country. The other birds followed his action, all eyeing the place with equal delight. Then, as with one accord, the four formed a group and slowly sailed downward. This brought them to that part of the newly discovered land which bordered on the desert's edge, but it was just as pretty here as anywhere. So the Orc and the birds alighted, and the three passengers at once got out of their swings. "Oh, Cap'n Bill, isn't this just fine and dandy?" exclaimed Trot rapturously. "How lucky we are to discover this beautiful country." "This country has some rather high class, I'll admit, Trot," replied the old sailor man, looking around him. "But we don't know as yet what its people are like." "No one could live in such a country without being happy and good, I'm sure of that," she said earnestly. "Don't you think so, Button-Bright?" "I'm not thinking just now," answered the little boy. "It tires me to think, and I've never seemed to gain anything by it. When we see the people who live here, we will know what they are like, and no amount of thinking will make them any different." "True enough," said the Orc, "but now I want to make a proposal. While you are getting acquainted with the new country, which looks as if it contains everything to make one happy, I would like to fly along all by myself and see if I can find my home on the other side of the great desert. If I do, I will stay there, of course, but if I fail to find Orkland, I will return to you in a week to see if I can do anything more to assist you." They were sorry to lose their queer companion, but could offer no objection to the plan, so the Orc bade them good-bye, and rising swiftly in the air, he flew over the country and was soon lost to view in the distance. The three birds which had carried our friends now begged permission to return by the way they had come, to their own home, saying they were anxious to show their families how big they'd become. So Cap'n Bill and Trot and Button-Bright all thanked them gratefully for their assistance, and soon the birds began their long flight toward the land of Mo. Being now left to themselves in this strange land, the three comrades selected a pretty pathway and began walking along it. They believed this path would lead them to a splendid castle which they espied in the distance, the turrets of which towered far above the tops of the trees which surrounded it. It did not seem very far away, so they sauntered on slowly, admiring the beautiful ferns and flowers that lined the pathway, listening to the singing of the birds and the soft chirping of the grasshoppers. Presently the path wound over a little hill. In a valley that lay beyond the hill was a tiny cottage surrounded by flower beds and fruit trees. On the shady porch of the cottage they saw, as they approached, a pleasant-faced woman sitting amidst a group of children, to whom she was telling stories. The children quickly discovered the strangers and ran toward them with an exclamation of astonishment, so that Trot and her friends became the center of a curious group, all chattering excitedly. Cap'n Bill's wooden leg seemed to arouse the wonder of the children, as they could not understand why he had not two meat legs. This attention seemed to please the old sailor, who patted the heads of the children kindly, and then, raising his hat to the woman, he inquired, "Can you tell us, madam, just what country this is?" She stared hard at all three of the strangers as she replied briefly, "Jinxland." "Oh!" exclaimed Cap'n Bill with a puzzled look. "And where is Jinxland, please?" "In the Quadling country," said she. "What?" cried Trot in sudden excitement. "Do you mean to say this is the Quadling country, the land of Oz?" "To be sure I do," the woman answered. "Every bit of land that is surrounded by the great desert is the land of Oz, as you ought to know as well as I do, but I'm very sorry to say that Jinxland is separated from the rest of the Quadling country by that row of high mountains you see yonder, which have such steep sides that no one can cross them. So we live here all by ourselves, and are ruled by our own king instead of by Ozma of Oz." "I've been to the land of Oz before," said Button-Bright, "but I've never been here." "Did you ever hear of Jinxland before?" asked Trot. "No," said Button-Bright. "It is on the map of Oz, though," asserted the woman, "and it's a fine country, I assure you. If only," she added, and then paused to look around her with a frightened expression, "if only—" Here she stopped again, as if not daring to go on with her speech. "If only what, ma'am?" asked Cap'n Bill. The woman sent the children into the house. Then she came closer to the strangers and whispered, "If only we had a different king, we would be very happy and contented." "What's the matter with your king?" asked Trot curiously, but the woman seemed frightened to have said so much, and retreated to her porch, merely saying, "The king punishes severely any treason on the part of his subjects." "What's treason?" asked Button-Bright. "In this case," replied Cap'n Bill, "treason seems to consist of knocking the king, but I guess we know his disposition now as well as if the lady had said more." "I wonder," said Trot, going up to the woman, "if you could spare us something to eat." We haven't had anything but popcorn and lemonade for a long time." "Oh, bless your heart, of course I can spare you some food," the woman answered, and entering the cottage she soon returned with a tray loaded with sandwiches, cakes, and cheeses. One of the children drew a bucket of clear, cold water from a spring, and the three wanderers ate heartily and enjoyed the good things immensely. When Button-Bright could eat no more, he filled the pockets of his jacket with cakes and cheese. Not even the children objected to this. Indeed, they all seemed pleased to see the strangers eat, so Cap'n Bill decided that no matter what the King of Jinxland was like, the people would prove friendly and hospitable. "Well, whose castle is that yonder, ma'am?" he asked, waving his hand toward the towers that rose above the trees. "Belongs to His Majesty, King Cruel," she said. "Oh, indeed. Does he live there?" "When he's not out hunting with his fierce courtiers and war captains," she replied. "And is he hunting now?" Trot inquired. "I do not know, my dear. The less we know about the king's actions, the safer we are." It was evident the woman did not like to talk about King Cruel, and so, having finished their meal, they said goodbye and continued along the pathway. "Well, don't you think we'd better keep away from the king's castle, Captain?" asked Trot. "Well," said he, "King Cruel would find out sooner or later that we're in his country, so we may as well face the music now. Perhaps he isn't quite so bad as the woman thinks he is. Kings aren't always as popular with their people, you know, even if they do the best they know how." "Ozma's popular," said Button-Bright. "Ozma's different from any other ruler from all I've heard," remarked Trot musingly, as she walked beside the boy. "And after all, we really are in the land of Oz, where Ozma rules every king and everybody else. I've never heard of anybody getting hurt in her dominions. Did you, Button-Bright?" "Not when she knows about it," he replied, "but those birds landed us in just the wrong place, seems to me. They might have carried us right on over that row of mountains to the Emerald City." "True enough," said Cap'n Bill, "but they didn't, and so we must make the best of Jinxland. Let's try not to be afraid." "Well, I'm not afraid," said Button-Bright, pausing to look at the pink rabbit that popped its head out of a hole in the field nearby. "Nor am I," added Trot. "Really, Cap'n, I'm so glad to be anywhere at all in the wonderful fairyland of Oz that I think I'm the luckiest girl in all the world. Dorothy lives in the Emerald City, you know, and so does the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman and Tik-Tok and the Shaggy Man, and all the rest of them that we've heard on so much about, not to mention Ozma, who must be the sweetest and loveliest girl in all the world." "Take your time, Trot," advised Button-Bright. "You don't have to say it all in one breath, you know. You haven't mentioned half the curious people in the Emerald City." "That air Emerald City," said Cap'n Bill impressively, "happens to be on the other side of those mountains, and we're told no one's able to cross. I don't want to discourage of you, Trot, but we're almost as much separated from your Ozma and Dorothy as we were when we lived in California." There was so much truth in this statement that they all walked on in silence for some time. Finally, they reached the grove of stately trees that bordered the ground of the king's castle. They had gone halfway through it when the sound of sobbing, as of someone in bitter distress, reached their ears and caused them to halt abruptly. And that is the end of Chapter 9, The Kingdom of Jinxland. Tomorrow night, right here, 8 o'clock Facebook Live, we will read Chapter 10, Pawn, the Gardener's Boy, who I will note is still not the Scarecrow. Good night, everyone.